Shalom, family, and welcome to Into All Truth, Live Light Well. Just letting you watch this video again, which I posted in the late summer, but also letting you know that I will be on Patreon. I used to have a channel there, and I'm just awaiting my approval now. So that is one of the places where I will be. My channel will be called Into All Truth, Live Light Well for both audiences. Okay, so it's Into All Truth, Live Light Well, and likely the link to it will be Into All Truth. Okay, let's get into it. Shalom, family, and welcome to Into All Truth. Welcome back. I give all praise and glory and honor to the Most High Yahweh. I pray that this word blesses the hearers. I pray that the eyes of your understanding be enlightened, that you be given a spirit of wisdom, revelation, and knowledge to know what is the hope of your calling, what is the inheritance of the assembly in Israel, and what are the riches of Yah's glory in Yeshua HaMashiach. So, family, just reminding you of our story that we were spread from Africa, from Israel to the four corners of the earth as the hidden ones, coming from the slave coast of Judea and those of our seed who were sent here after the fall of Assyria. And together we will come out of the west. The first shall be last, the last shall be first, and we are the fig tree that will come together as two sticks out of Babylon. I'm going to reveal to you exactly where the great city of Babylon is. And so what this particular message is about is that we need to get out. Why? Because the major cities in North America will be targeted. And I don't just mean that they'll be targeted by invaders. I mean targeted by Yah. And I'm going to get into why in a moment. Now, the fact that we are called out is a blessing. The scripture says, "Faithful is he that calleth you, who also will do it." He is faithful by whom you were called unto the fellowship of his Son, Yeshua, our Elohim. So we are called out by the lion who has come up out of his thicket. We have been awakened. And I'm not speaking against anybody who is saying that we should prosper or is concerned about us falling under ill leadership or into cults. I'm not advocating that setting up land with groups is wrong, but I'm saying that we should be prepared to move. When Israel came out of Egypt, they strapped their sandals on their feet, they put their belt about their waist and their garment on. They ate from the of the lamb, and they ate their bread in haste. They were ready to leave. And this is what I'm saying, is to be ready to leave. And I believe that we are called out of the major cities. I know there are high places of the enemy, even in the country, but still there's logical reasons why we're called out of the cities. And I want to go into some of those. But first, I want to talk about why we are of the generation of the promise to come out. When we look at Psalm 78, it says, and I'm just going to read it to you. It says, "Give ear, O my people, to my law, and incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable, and I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, showing to the generation to come the praises of Yahweh and his strength, and his wonderful works that he hath done. For he established a testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in Yah and not forget the works of Yahuwah, but keep his commandments. And so there are two words or phrases that I really want to draw some attention to, because in the Hebrew there are always much deeper meanings to them. And that is the generation to come, which is the generation of the promise, and the word arise, the children which should be born, who would arise and declare them, these promises, to their children, that they might set their hope in Yahuwah and not forget the works of Yahuwah. So when we talk about the generation to come, the Hebrew word for this is aharon, meaning to come. And King James translates this in Strong's H314 in the following manner. The last generation, afterwards, the latter, the end, the utmost generation, following, the hindermost generation, the hindmost, rearward, the uttermost generation. And then the word, this generation who should arise, is the word kum, or like kuma, to come, or quam. And so that is defined as to confirm, establish, accomplish, to arise. A primitive root, to abide, accomplish, be clear, confirm, continue, decree, lift up again, but newly ordained, perform, pitch, raise up, rouse up, stir up, strengthen, establish, stir up, strengthen, succeed, surely, and uphold. And of course, back to aharon, it again is the latter, utmost, following, hindermost, uttermost reward. And when we look at the book of Esdras and the journey of the 10 tribes to Eretz Azareth, the definition is very similar. And Eretz Azareth is, of course, North America or Babylon. Eretz Azareth. Azareth sounds a lot like Ashtaroth or Esther, which is Easter. And so this is the land of Azareth, of Esther. And of course, we know the Statue of Liberty is Esther. It's also Diana, these various manifestations of the Babylonian goddesses. Second Esdras 1340 talks about the 10 tribes being carried away captive and then going to another land. And in the process, taking counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their old land. And they entered into the Euphrates by way of the narrow places by the river, for the Most High showed signs for them, and he held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years, and the same region is called Azareth. Then dwelt they there until the latter time, and now they shall begin to come again. So when we look at Aharon as well as Eretz Azareth, there are some similarities. Azareth, or Eretz Akarath, means another land, the final place of the end, the vanishing point, time out of mind. So land, Eretz, means another, other, next, or strange, last end, posterity, hindermost, reward. So you see it's the same words. And this is Babylon, the place where the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And when we look at verse 41, it says another country, and that's what it says in English, but in Hebrew, it's another world. Olam, vanishing point, time out of mind, eternity, everlasting. And of course, Israel is its own world. And here in this land, Israel is out of their world. They're out of their land and out of the world of Israel. the set apart place. And what other scriptures do we have that talk about being outside of this world, or a world ending, a world that we need to come out of? Well, the scripture says that Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it which followeth, okay? And John 15:19 says, if ye were of the world would love his own. But because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. So this is clearly a world, another world, a land of strangers that we are not of. Isaiah 45:17 says, Israel shall be saved in Yahuwah with an everlasting salvation. You shall not be ashamed nor confounded, world without end. So this is the world of Jacob, the new world to come. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. So this is not our world, and we're to come out of this world. Israel is a world unto itself. The West was the end of Israel, but the beginning of the new world of the Amorites and the Gentiles, but ultimately the beginning of the new world that Jacob would start. Now, I know that scripture says, be in the world, but not of it, as you are saving others. But because of this particular appointed time, we are now at a time where we are called to come out of it. And of course, I showed you this picture of this bull, the ox, who is representative of Israel, or Ephraim, the 10 tribes being here. They're also in Africa and Australia and in eastern parts of Asia. But this is the sacrificial Aleph. This is the sacrificial wild bull whose flesh is being destroyed in the land of Azareth. That's why there were so many massacres of the water buffalo when they came, the bison, when Esau came here, was because this was the beginning of the sacrifice of this flesh of the wild bull. When we look at Shavuot, which enters into the 2,000 years of leaven in the word, one of the animals sacrificed, of course, is the bull. And the innards are placed on the altar, where as the flesh of the bull is set outside of the camp, outside of the place of protection, the house of enclosure, and left to be destroyed outside of the camp. And here now Israel, both Israel and Judah, are here as that sacrificial animal being destroyed, the body, the flesh outside of the camp, so that in this land we turn to submission to Yahweh. We become the ox that can lead the cart, the ark of the saved of Israel, back home to Israel, just like when the ark was brought back by the oxen back to Israel after the Philistines had it. So it's the same kind of thing. It's the mortification of the flesh, and this is the yielding of the strength and power of the bull, the castration of the bull, to become the ox that is completely submitted to Yah, and now can become the full bride of Yeshua, can completely submit, just like a wife must submit to her husband. So now this ox can submit to its owner, to its master, and know its master. So family, just for the sake of clarification, what I'm going to do is parallel where we are now with Israel's previous times of captivity and settling down, and then period of ending captivity and coming out of captivity, in order for us to do a check as to where we are in the times. Now, the Hebrews have a concept of time that works in this way, in terms of the beginning of the end, the middle of the end, and the end of end. So we could kind of see that as we're in the beginning of the end. In other words, the plagues are coming and we are working on coming out, okay? And then the middle of the end would be coming into Israel, and then the end of the end would finally be the coming of Mashiach. So I'm just going to pose these rhetorical questions just so that you can consider and think in your mind about where we are in the timeline of captivity, okay? So, called out or still in the midst of captivity. So here's my question to you. Have we come out of a famine, been rescued by Egypt, and are we resting in a kind of Goshen with our own king like Joseph ruling in a foreign land? Or are we at the end of our captivity? I think we're at the end of our captivity. Are we in Babylon? And have we been instructed to remain in Babylon and prosper and marry and have families like Daniel and the captives of Israel when they were in their 70-year captivity to the Babylonians? Or, like Zerubbabel, are we grieving before the kings because the temple is broken down and we are out of our land and it's the appointed time to come out? See, there's a difference between staying, remaining, settling down in the cities, building community, prosperity, all of those things. We can continue to do those things, but we don't have a mind to stay. We are at the beginning of the end and it's time to come out. So I'm just going to run a couple more checks for you. Are we in captivity to the Medo-Persians like Mordecai and Esther were, and serving as high officials or looking to marry in amongst those people? Or are we at the end of the captivity to a nation that enslaved us? The answer is we're at the end of a captivity to a nation that enslaved us. Okay, now here's the question for the time of Yeshua. Are we vassals? In other words, are we a nation serving a larger Roman or Greek nation, awaiting our Messiah to come in the flesh? Or has Yeshua already come in the flesh? Well, the answer to that is Yeshua has already come in the flesh. So we're not in Spain, we're not in all of Europe evangelizing, being in the world and not of it. We are actually in a time where we are called out, okay? Because Yeshua has already come in our flesh, okay? Now, here's my last check. Are we in the four corners of the earth, having begun our captivity and required to serve and settle down, or are we at the end of our 400 years of slavery? Now, it's very clear to all of us that we're at the end of it, okay? But we still are here. We're still serving. But we do have to have the mindset of preparing to come out because we know the disasters are going to come. We know that it is the beginning of the end. How do we know? Because the plagues have already been coming and because the word tells us so. Therefore, referring to Babylon, shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is Yahuwah our Elohim who judgeth her. So we know we are in a nation and a place where death and mourning and famine and fire burning will come upon the land because Elohim, Yahuwah, our Elohim, will judge this place. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers in her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. So, are we called out or are we still in captivity? We are called out here. And being called out means that we are protected from sin, disasters, plagues, and judgment, which was just mentioned. Famine, mourning, plagues, and being burned with fire is what we will protect ourselves against by receiving the call and being obedient to the command to come out. Now, is there any example ever throughout all of Scripture of Israel not physically coming out of captivity at the appointed time without a negative consequence? Well, let me see here. When Abraham was told to leave his father's house, he functionally, actually left his father's house, not just physically, not just spiritually, but physically. Now, when Jacob was given the appointed time to leave Laban's house, did he leave or did he just spiritually leave? Well, Jacob left Laban's house. When Moshe and Israel were told to tell Pharaoh that he had to let Yah's people go, did Moshe and Israel just spiritually leave Egypt, or did they actually come out functionally and in proper order? They actually came out. Now, did Zerubbabel leave Babylon at the appointed time physically, or did he just do so spiritually? He left physically and, of course, spiritually. Now, did Israel leave Medo-Persia and return to build again the temple at the appointed time? Or did they just come out spiritually? You see, nobody remained after the appointed times in the land of their captivity except the 10 tribes. And in the course of that, ironically, Ephraim and Dan lost their 144,000 witness. According to Judges 18, Dan had set up graven images. And so neither of them are included in the 144,000 as witnesses because they didn't physically and spiritually leave the land of their captivity. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, that I'm saying don't continue to do business. No, I'm saying continue to do business. I'm saying continue to build community, continue to network. I am not saying don't continue to do business. That's what Yeshua said, continue to do business until I return. What I am saying is that there are going to be stages to us getting out, just like how Zerubbabel got money from the coffers of his king to rebuild the temple, and then all of the other Levitical priests blessed it, and eventually the people came out. So there's a timing for things. So we already talked about the plagues and the other things that we will escape if we come out of her, out of the cities, and out of actual Babylon eventually to Greater Babylon, which is North America, which is Canada and the United States. Just to confirm exactly and precisely who Mystery Babylon is, I want to just take you quickly before we go on to some scripture in the Bible that talks about the final Babylon being set up on its base. And it's the story of 2 women and a basket. And not at all ironically, the goddess Diana or Ashtoreth, or Artemis was pictured on the cover of the Economist as a reference at the beginning of the year. And these are the 2 goddesses of the Babylonian Empire. And here we have a rendering of this female artist who's portraying herself as Artemis or Diana, both as Diana and Judith on the left. And you see she's pictured with another woman, and the colors are red, white, and blue, which used to be the colors of true Israel and were co-opted by the Gentile nations and the other people impersonating Israel, and of course America, who is now the priest of the earth, the fallen priest of the earth. So, but basically this is a picture of Artemis or Diana and Isis, the two goddesses of Babylon. And it's not ironic that this is a depiction of Judith severing the head of the Assyrian king when the Assyrian king came to attack Israel. His head was placed in a basket. And so this is another rendering of two women in a basket. And two women in a basket is very significant to the revelation of Mystery Babylon, the revelation of the horror of Babylon. And so here is another image of two women in a basket, or the representatives, the female representation of the horror of Babylon. And of course, even Esau, Edom, is called the daughter of Babylon. And so hence we have this female representation. Israel is called the daughter of Yah, okay? And just so conversely, because Esau killed Nimrod, he inherited Babylon. So the Esarians or Edom are called the daughter of Babylon, or the whore of Babylon. And so then we have the archetypes of the two women in the basket. These are the women of Babylon. Babylonian women of Shinar, who were removed and sent east across the waters to set up Shinar, Babylon, on its base. So it's the harlot and the whore in the red and blue, Canada and America. And so here's the scripture for the creation of Babylon here in the West, Zechariah 5:5-11. 5 is the number of destruction. The angel who was speaking to me came forward and said to me, "Look up and see what is appearing." And I asked, "What is it?" And he replied, "A basket." And he added, "This is the iniquity of the people throughout the land." Then the cover of the lid was raised, and there in the basket sat a woman. And he said, "This is wickedness." And he pushed her back into the basket and pushed its lead cover down on it. Then I looked up, and before me were two women with the wind in their wings, and they had wings like those of a stork. And they lifted up the basket between heaven and earth. "Where are they taking the basket?" I asked the angel who was speaking to me. And he replied, "To the country of Babylonia, to build a house for it. When the house is ready, the basket will be set there in its place." So this is a reversal of Moshe being drawn out of the waters and put in a basket. This is now these women lifting themselves, this whore, up into the air, like Hasatan exalts himself and lifts himself up. Nasa, he lifts up wickedness and carries it over to the true Babylon. And of course we have the goddess Diana in San Francisco, where the Luciferian headquarters are, and there she is overseeing the molestation of multiple children by moths and serpents. And she's approving this because this is the Feast of the Fallen. So she is on the west or left coast. And then on the east coast, we have, of course, Ashtaroth, or Isis, the goddess of Babylonian times and Egypt. And so these are the two women in the basket, the two women holding either side of North America, America in particular, who have set the basket in which dwells the whore on its place, and they hold it in place. And what is interesting is that these two women will have to cut off the head of the Assyrian king in order for their nation to be reborn. That means they have to wound the head of the enemy in order for their nation to be reborn. Now, also, it's prophesied that Israel would go into a land that would have a trench about it. Doesn't it say that in Luke 19? "For the day shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about you and compass you around and keep you on every side." So Israel is here in North America, Mystery Babylon, set up as an offering. and basically sieged on an island that is America. Is there any other reference in Scripture for an offering being set up on an altar in its place where a trench was cast about it? Yes. When we look at the prophet Elijah, when he fought against the prophets of Baal, he poured a trench of water all around the altar, and then he set it on fire to send up an offering to Yah. So this is definitely Mystery Babylon, the wilderness, where Israel, the daughter of Israel, is held captive. But Jeremiah 50 actually talks about what will happen to Babylon and why. The word of Yahuwah spake against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. Declare ye among the nations, and publish and set up a standard, publish and conceal not. Say, Babylon is taken, Bel is confounded. Merodach is broken in pieces. Her idols are confounded, her images are broken in pieces. A drought is upon her waters, and they shall be dried up. For it is the land of graven images, and they are mad upon their idols. So you can see from this scripture that Merodach, there's many idols of Merodach or Marmaduke, or basically the Nimrod of Babylon, the second Nimrod, all over the place, idols and idols of Diana. And these idols are going to be broken in pieces. And where do we find the most idols? In cities. So let's take a look at Chicago, some of the major cities. And I'm not doing Canada, I'm just doing the United States. Don't get mad at me, Canadians. But the first is Chicago. And Chicago actually means destitute in Hebrew. Okay, it's derived from kago, which means forbear, and he, a prefix, may mean something great, from kago, or from gichi, great. Besides several other words or expressions which may be found in this dialect or the same sound yet of differing meanings, Chicago was the name of a noted Sac chief and means in that dialect, he that stands by the tree. In the Potawatomi dialect, sounds like patois, doesn't it? The word Chicago, without addition or abridgment, means destitute. So the city of Chicago is a destitute place. And we just saw how the bull was so common and popular there. And we know the Chicago bulls dwell there. And we know that Moses spoke against the golden calf, crushed it up, and had all of it thrown in the river. Chicago can mean desolation or void. And even David spoke against the many bulls that have compassed him, strong bulls of Bashan that have beset him round about. So these are the wild, unbridled bulls of the wilderness, okay? Whereas Israel is eventually called an oxen. But in Israel's, and we talked earlier about the ox, and in Israel's state of rebellion, it is a wild ox. And of course, the big basketball team is the Chicago Bulls, the Wild Brothers, right? But what does the word say about Israel? That the ox knoweth its owner, but Israel does not know. So just to reiterate again, the bison or the ox is a strong symbol of idolatry. Also in Chicago, we find this Ozark exhibition, the Ozarks, Oz's Ark. Their place of protection is in Illinois. It is the land of Edom, the land of Oz. Okay, and so we see here that there is all of these statues of the Tin Man, the fearful lion. So this is Judah in submission to this land of Babylon, and we have the scarecrow. So the lion without courage, the straw man, scarecrow, the tin man, all of this illusion and falsehood, and all of these are idols. When we look at Detroit, and the spirit that is in the city of Detroit, it actually has a statue of Baphomet, of Satan. And you can see it has these two children looking up towards Ha-Satan. One is a Negro boy and the other is a little white girl. And we have this spirit of Detroit, which is this giant man that is holding Saturn's star in one hand. And Saturn is the star, or what those who believe in planets believe would be the planet of Ha-Satan. So this is his star. And a multi-armed goddess holding a child in his other hand. And so this is clearly an idol. This is a giant, the offspring of the fallen. And then lastly, we have this 17-foot statue called Waiting, and it's of a Negro woman and a girl in the business district of Chicago. And both of them, they're calling them kind of a Mickey Mouse, but it's clear that these are, this is the hair of two black women, a black woman and her daughter, and their eyes are X's. In other words, they're either dead or they're asleep. And this is what the prosperity of this place is resting upon, is the work and labor of the Hebrews. When we look at Vegas, of course, Vegas has the whole Egyptian statue set up. They're worshiping money. They're in the desert, in a place of spiritual destitution, no trees. Vegas is one of the most corrupt places in the world. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And all of the towers for the new Bitcoin are also there. When we look at Atlanta, we see Dagon, the fish god, held up, and Romulus, the wolf god, or dog god, like Egyptian Anubis. And we see men beneath this wolf god, sucking at the teat of the wolf god, which is really disgusting. So these are clearly Babylonian idols. In Washington, of course, you have all the Illuminati monuments and symbolism everywhere. The most prominent, of course, being Diana, the goddess Diana atop the White House. This was built by a Negro artisan. And this, of course, is the goddess that the Hebrews built incense to and had the men worshiping her. And then, of course, this obelisk is one of Ha-Satan's symbols of the big giant phallus. And that also ruled in Egypt too. And so that's ruling in Washington, D.C. And of course, I already said Merodach is broken in pieces. Her idols are confounded. Her images are broken in pieces. Okay, and this is Merodach. This is the Assyrian king. Okay, and he's a giant Nephilim. He's holding a lion like a pet, in the same way that he held the 10 tribes and is currently holding Israel, Lion of Judah, like a small pet. And then it says here, of course, that Yah is going to send a nation from the north to come up against the land. And here's some older pictures of Nimrod, another iteration or version of Babylon. There are many Babylonian kings that are Nimrods. And so these are the idols in these major cities that are going to be broken in pieces. Here we have some San Francisco idols. Again, the goddess Diana is in almost every city. The satanic headquarters are in San Francisco. And here we have this gruesome, morbid statue with all these children, babies, being mauled by moths and pigs and beasts and that are feeding on them. And there's an orgy going on with these babies. It's just disgusting. And so those are idols in San Francisco. And of course, Los Angeles, you have the Oscar and you have the Hollywood sign that points to the Hollywood, which is what you cast spells with. But we know that Hollywood has the most stars and celebrities are in Los Angeles, the greatest idols of all in human form. And of course, we have creepy Denver, Colorado with gargoyles and Anubis at the airport, and this weird dark horse that's blue, and you can see all of its veins in the airport. Just very strange murals and everything painted on the walls at the Denver airport. So again, these are idols that are going to be destroyed in major cities. Idols to Ha-Satan. Of course, in New York, once again, you have Diana or Azareth in the Statue of Liberty. You have Anubis again, the Egyptian dog god. You see all over the place. And of course, the bull, once again, the raging, rampant bull, the golden, which reminds us of the golden calf of Israel. And of course, the market upon which the entire stock market was based on the Aleph, on Israel's strength and power. So I wanted to find out more about the origins of the name of York, or New York, the city. And it turns out that York was a town in the UK, what we know as Britain now, in Roman times, and its Celtic name is recorded in Roman sources as Iboracum, like where the Hebrews came to or arose, right, from our past word study, our earlier word study, Iboracum, which doesn't really seem to have any relationship to the word York in terms of transliteration. And the Anglos took over the city about around 400 AD, and then adopted the name by folk etymology. And they say that the word York, or Eophoric, means wild boar. So York means wild boar. Wild boar town. It also means rich in wild boar, but there's no transliteration. The sound of the words does not sound the same to York. And I looked for ancient etymology books, and York, even words with Y in them, were not even in some of the ancient books. And so, again, the definition here is, in some cases, it means yew tree estate, which could, again, have its origins in the Hebrews as ewe, lambs, sheep, rams. But then there's this switch to boars and York, and like an identity change. The scripture also talks about the fact that Esau's sons were dukes. And so it says in Genesis 36:15, these were the dukes of the sons of Esau, the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau, Duke Teman, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, Duke Kenaz. But the dukes of York is the first mention of the word York. So these were dukes of the land called York. And Jasher again tells us that the Edomites or Esau never set their own kings over themselves, but rather they had Gentile kings, and they were only called dukes or earls. And from 1461 to 1485, the first Duke, Edmund of Langley, was the progenitor, the beginner of this House of York, and he was a son of Edward III. And a lot of times the word Edmund is substituted for Edom, okay? It's just they switch around the letters and add an N. So then I started wondering about the idea of New York being a kind of Jericho or Iraq, because now Jericho was the first major city that Israel conquered when they went around it and blew the trumpet for 7 days, and the walls of Jericho fell, and they were able to conquer the land of Israel again because the Chaldeans were in their land. In terms of transliteration, the word sounds very much the same. York could sound like Iraq or Jericho, because Jericho, there's no J's, as we always say in Hebrew. J's are always Y's. So if you say Jericho, you say Jericho. And Jericho sounds a lot like Iraq. And if you say Jericho or Yarach or Iraq, if you say York, Yarach, York, New York, New York, it sounds very much the same. And so Iraq is supposed to be a region south of ancient Iraq, and it's a term for the center of modern Iraq. And Jericho's name in Hebrew, Jericho, is generally thought to derive from the Canaanite word for moon. Now in Hebrew, that same word is Yerach. The word for moon is Yerach. So if we say York or Iraq or Jericho, so Yorach, Iraq, or Jericho, they all sound like moon. And this is the name of the lunar deity Yerika, for whom the city was a center of worship for the Canaanites. So books on ancient Iraq provide this history that Iraq or Jericho was the name of a lunar deity. So I wanted to kind of look more into the idea of this. And so I looked, I don't believe that we're to worship at the time of the new moon, but rather in this idea that Kodesh means set apart. It doesn't mean new moon. So I went into that in my calendar video, but I'm going to go into it again here. So Kodesh in the Tanakh, it means new month. In 254 instances, it means new month. In 20 instances, it means new moon. And again, in Hebrew, the word for moon is Yerach. And the Babylonians and Assyrians worshipped the moon, worshipped the Yerach. That was their moon goddess. So Iraq or Jericho, Yerach or Jericho was the name of their deity. And of course, the Ashkenazi Talmudists worship the new moon. The Islamists worship the new moon. The new moon is in the symbol for Russia also. And of course, when we look at Strong's H3394, it means new moon. And of course, there's mention of it in Jubilee 6 that you're not to worship the moon, that they are for the monitoring of times and not for worship. And there's condemnation about this. You can just read this a little further if you want. Deuteronomy 4:19 says, unless thou lift up thy eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars and all the hosts in heaven, and should be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahuwah Abba Yah hath divided unto the nations under the whole heaven. So he's saying, don't worship them, just use them for the divining of times on the earth. And then there's another warning in Deuteronomy 17:3, and hath gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or the moon or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have not commanded. So he's saying, I have not commanded this, but you've gone and done it. So you can see my 400 years is over video to see more on the new moon and why it's not, Kodesh does not mean new moon, it means new month. Okay? And so I wanted to also take a look at some maps of New York to get more clarification on the idea of New York meaning new moon, New York. Okay? What I found when I looked at a close-up of Long Island, New York, I found that there was a city in New York that is actually called Jericho, Jericho. So that is the original name of New York, New Jericho, and or Iraq, or Wairaka, or Erech, or Yerach, or Jericho, or York. New York, new moon. And when I looked even more closely at this Long Island map in New York, I found that there were two suburbs or cities. There's two cities named Babylon, or townships or suburbs in that area, also in New York, Long Island, New York, named Babylon, West Babylon and Babylon. And interestingly enough, they're near Amityville, so where the horror movie was shot. So it's just kind of interesting. It looks like New York is new moon, New York, and is a city dedicated to the worship of the moon. So when you talk about Babylon, that great city being destroyed, it is very likely New York City, New Moon City, Iraq, or Jericho of Babylon. Of course, all of Babylon will become a haunt for devils. When it talks about this city being destroyed, we know that Long Island has its great shipping yard where all of the ships come in to deliver their goods from Europe and Africa to America. And so this is why I talk about Hebrews casting away their idols, including their American notions of prosperity. Now, Yah is going to return to Israel all that she has earned in her captivity, like he did for Abraham and for Isaac and for Israel at the time of coming out of Egypt. But what Israel has to let go of is any notion of an American dream of prosperity. Okay, the American dream, which is built on their own slavery and a system of slavery, okay, and a mindset of slavery. And how do we know this? Isaiah 30, 20-23 says, "And though Yahweh give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet shall not thy teachers be removed into a corner anymore. But thine eyes shall see thy teachers, and thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, This is the way, walk ye in it, when ye turn to the right hand, and when ye turn to the left. Ye shall defile also the covering of thy graven images of silver, and the ornament of thy molten images of gold, and thou shalt cast them away as a menstruous cloth, and thou shalt say unto it, Get thee hence." So this is the idol of America. This is the idol of American idol, celebrity, wealth, the American idol of the illusion of prosperity, okay? Like the Statue of Liberty, which was once beautiful golden or copper colored and is now just a green oxidized patina, just utterly false. So you shall say, Get thee hence, and then shall he give the rain of thy seed that thou shalt sow the ground withal, and bread of the increase in the earth, and it shall be fat and plenteous, and in that day shall thy cattle feed in large pastures. So you see, it's actual cattle. We've been talking about the bull, but it's actual cattle, living things, not false idols that become our prosperity in our homeland, not these false things made with human hands. So as the called out, again, faithful is he that calleth you, who also will do it. So he will do it. Okay? Yah is faithful, by whom you were called into the fellowship of his son, Yahshua, our Elohim. And of course, this means coming out in steps, coming out spiritually and physically, and asking the way home of Yah, and knowing that he will do it. And when we say coming out physically, we're also talking about, the effects of things, as I repeat over and over again: chemtrails, HARP, 5G, GMO foods, all of these things, multiple cell phone towers, all of these things affecting your health, your thought life, your psychology, your spiritual atmosphere, your ability to sense and intuit what's going on with others. All of these things are coloring that. So one of the reasons why we want to come out and be in nature is to get away from those dark spiritual influences. Now, one of the illusions that we've been given as a people is that we've been lied to, and we have been told that we are urban people, when in fact that is not true. How can this be when we spent 40 years in the wilderness? Now, the Levites had towns, but largely we were rural people who were out in nature, and we would do the Sukkot every single year. We would camp and be out in nature, and we would journey to other people's lands and towns. And so once again, I'm saying, let's look at going off grid, getting out from under the radar. And Yahuwah himself did not dwell in temples made with human hands. And these cities, these North American cities, are temples to these gods. Just like Israel was a set-apart place, and its people a set-apart place and a temple unto the living Yahuwah. And so isn't it natural that we should also not dwell in temples or cities made with human hands, particularly the hands of our enemy? Nature is his temple that praises him. He says, even the rocks will praise me if you don't praise me. But once again, we're the called out people. And what I'm saying is that we need to think about leaving the city and having alternate ways of growing food, living more cheaply. And I've given you examples in other videos. I have my whole off-grid playlist. And so, and I'm not saying, yeah, go and build a compound and set up as a cult, or go to cult leaders. I'm not saying that every situation like that ends up in a cult. And we certainly know that likely the FBI or CIA or whoever planted those cults to put, knowing that in these end times we would look to do those things. So I'm not saying every situation is going to end up like that. But I am saying do avoid them. I used to write web content for an organization that it was globally against cults. And like I said, I prayed at House of Prayer. And originally, when I first got saved, for a second, I went to a place called Church of Christ. And so those were both cults. And so that put me very much on guard against cults. So I'm very much against cults. But there are ways that you can be discerning about this. So it is wise to share resources and be in community, but you do need to be discerning about who it is that you are either buying land with, or sharing land with, living with. There are many different ways that we can go about this. And what I'm saying is that I'm not against leadership. I don't want people to be confused about that. You know, I obviously listen to teachers. I am not against leadership. Leadership is honorable and necessary, but it's important to know that Yeshua is your leader above all men. And yet we do also have human leaders, okay? Now, we want to avoid self-appointed leaders who create a dependency on them, whether it's for food or shelter, any primary things. Cultish leaders expect you to give them all their money. They will privilege themselves in a community above others like a king. And of course, Israel was counseled against not having a king. It was a clear rejection of Yah. And of course, Yeshua is the king. Cultish leaders say theirs is the only group teaching the truth. And they subtly pressure you not to leave. It's a good idea to collectively own land that you benefit from, but you don't necessarily have to live there. You can simply grow things and go and harvest at times. You can network with multiple communities in traveling. In fact, there's safety in this. It's a good idea to learn to live stealthily in the city if necessary. And if living in the city, to reserve a rural place of escape. It's a good idea to keep a bicycle for transportation in the event of an EMP blast, to use Faraday cages, as I said before. FEMA camps, stadiums, Walmart, those kinds of places I would say are very dangerous, because there's going to be a time when all of the Gentiles, and that includes the Hebrews who refuse to be Hebrews and become Gentiles by rejecting Yeshua and their seed heritage, will be enslaved again by the nation from the north. And so I think a lot of these camps are set up for that process to take place. And that may even be a process that takes place in order to repay our debt. Those people given in exchange for us. It says, I have ransomed you to the Sabaeans. And so that might be what that comes out of. So I would not trust. We have Katrina as the example for what happened at the FEMA camps. And even today, they're not generally very supportive. Strongly consider campers, caravans, renovating these things, vans, off-grid power like solar power, water filtration in the event that you are caught out in the wilderness and you need clean water. Make sure you get your passport, especially before 2020, because there's going to be limitations on things like people who have not paid their child support, because you want to be able to get out. There will be, you know, whether it's a supernatural escape or in part a natural escape where the king's people will fly you places, whatever the case, it's going to help to have your paperwork in order to expedite the process. And so yeah, just put on your belt and your sandals and be ready to leave. Okay, be ready to. It says Yah will make a way of escape for us. So be prepared. Now, I also want to talk to you about righteous leadership, what it looks like, because I don't want people to think I'm against leadership. Leadership is absolutely necessary. But the qualities of a righteous leader are that they are humble and dependent on Yeshua and the body, and they know that they can be removed at any time by Yah or the body. And then their teaching is line upon line, and they often have revelation in scripture. They should have the fruit of the Ruach Chodesh, patience, kindness, forgiving, long-suffering, etc. If they're married, they should have one wife. All kings and priests have one wife. And that wife should be submitted to them. And if it's a female leader, they should be submitted to their husbands. And they should be, they and their partner, their wife, usually a male leader, should be like Uman and Thummim. They should be two lights ministering to us. The spouses should minister together. A great leader rebukes, corrects, and admonishes in love. They humbly receive correction themselves. They revile not, they do not lash back. They humbly restore the repentant. If they've had to just leave somebody to be sifted by Hasatan, they will humbly try to look in on and restore that person multiple times. They do not lord their authority over others. They are generous with what Yah provides for them to provide for the people. They have a servant's heart. They are not a slanderer. They honor elderly men and women, men and women who are older than them, and they are wise and discerning. Okay? So I am very much for leaders. I don't want people thinking that I'm not. But leaders do have their role, and it's most important to remember, above all, Yeshua HaMashiach is your king and priest and leader. And you should, and this has been Israel's problem from the beginning, is they want to follow a man and not follow Yah or Yeshua. So always check in with the Ruach Kodesh about anything. Now, I wanted to just catch up again with one of my favorite tiny time travelers, this lovely woman and her kids. We're traveling in a van and living in a van for a while. And within 6 to 7 months, she went from living in a one-room apartment with her 2 daughters to living in this beautiful, gigantic RV. And here she is, a post from her on Tiny Time Travelers, just talking about when Hurricane Dorian was about to come through. And she says, although horrible weather is coming our way, God still shows us the beauty in the midst of the storm. Currently, everyone is packing and moving to safe locations in preparation for the Hurricane Dorian. And as much as I love RV life, I really miss van life right about now, because she had a tiny little van she could just drive off with, but with a big RV like that, you got to tow it in a pickup truck. One part of me loves staying put, while the other part of me would rather be on the go. So there's something she loves about traveling with her kids. I'm just thankful that we're safe and my job is alerted should the power go out. Boy, solar power comes in handy. Nevertheless, we'll keep pushing and moving forward no matter what the outcome. So she is in a position to be moved by Yah wherever he wants to take her, and she has all of her belongings and her children with her, and she has freedom and liberty. She's not paying rent. She's being powered by the sun, and she's free. She's saving so much money by not paying rent or a mortgage, and she's able to be moved by Yah. So let this be an encouragement to you people and family members, and I just thank you for watching. May Yah bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you. May he be gracious, lift the light of his countenance, and give you peace. And again, if you want to get my Into All Truth calendar, please go to livelightwell.com or Chaya Eat Life and Fast to learn more about eating and living fasting according to a Hebraic functional lifestyle. Please go to livelightwell.com to get a book, and both the book and calendar are downloaded from Dropbox. So you must have Dropbox, and in the event that I send it to you, a lot of times the calendar gets put into your junk mail. So always check your junk mail, okay? Usually I try to email you directly. So thank you, family, for watching. Shalom, Chaya.